In this tutorial, we're going to have a look at the gradient tool down here and a couple of these other tools that are in the tools palette. So start off by drawing a rectangle and double click on the gradient tool, and you've got a little palette that pops up. You can choose if you want a linear or radial gradient, and what's nice about this palette is that you can adjust it live so that you can see what the effect is going to be. You can also stretch out when you see that little dotted line pop up on the screen. You can stretch out the gradient. You can also change the color of the different gradient stops. You can also use the color palette. So if you can't find your color palette, it may be located under Window Color, and you can also have your swatches open if you like, so that you can select colors from in your swatches palette. So there's lots of different options for using the gradient tool, and you can as I said before, you can modify where the gradient is located and the stops along the gradient. That's something that you can do live, which is different to Photoshop because you kind of have to guess what it might look like. So it is a nice tool to play with. The dropper tool allows you to sample from one shape and fill in another shape. So let's just draw a circle, for instance. Whoops. And I'll just make that black and white circle. And if I say, okay, well, actually, I really wanted this pink to be in there, I can sample from the original or from another shape or image on the screen, and the eyedropper will copy it. So the eyedropper is a nice tool to use. You won't use the measuring tool very much, so we won't worry about that one. Now this tool down here, let's have a look at this one. I'm just going to put some block color in to my swatches so that you can see what's going to happen with the next set of tools. So I'm going to create a circle here, and in the next section of my canvas I'm going to create a square. Okay, and this tool here is a blend tool. So what it does is it blends the shape on one side to another shape. So let's select the first shape, select the second shape, and hit the blend tool. And if I click and drag, it creates a shape that is kind of in between the circle and in between the square. Another way of using that, so if I double click on that, let's specify the amount of steps that we want in between the two shapes. Let's go 5 preview. Okay, so these are 5 shapes in between. You can also modify the direction of the steps, so whether you want it to go from the circle to the square or the square to the circle, or you can have a distance. So in this case there's 1.4 millimeters between those shapes, and hit OK. And very often what I find is that students like to do this and then they add some other crazy tool to the mix just because they can. So be careful with these shapes. Okay, you can do some pretty groovy things with them, but sometimes people tend to go overboard. So that is the blend tool. And we'll just move that shape out of the way. Another tool that you might like to use is this one here, the symbol sprayer tool, and that works in conjunction with your symbol palette. So window, make sure that your symbols are visible. I'm going to choose some splatter, so splatter that around, and then I can modify what that splatter looks like depending on which of these tools I use. So it is a nice one to work with and to experiment with. Okay, you can change the graphic style of the splatter tool as well. Window, graphic styles. And I've just chosen this watercolor or bevel effect. As you can see, my computer is struggling a little bit with these graphic styles. Okay, but it's a nice one to play with.